that will begin to help us to discover the secrets to our dream. Here's what I want you to repeat after me, please, with power and conviction. Say, it's possible.
It's possible.
That's all I want you to do when you look at your dream. Just say to yourself every day, it's possible. Just say that every day to yourself. It's power and conviction.
Because
say
what
it's
does that
possible.
do?
See,
It's possible.
it begins to change your belief system. That's all I want you to do when you look at your. Just say to yourself every day,
the way in which we operate,
it's
ladies
possible.
and gentlemen, it's a
say that every day to yourself. It's power and conviction.
Because
say
what
it's
does that
possible.
do?
See,
It's possible.
it begins to change. That's all I want. All I want you to do when you look at your. Just say to yourself.
Elevate yourself.
You see, everything that you have is the things that you've created. So be careful about what you create. Everything that I send out.
Creative thinkers have been around longer than teachers of creative thinking, or even those who would define it. In fact, by definition, creative thinking seems to divide itself into two areas: hard work and inspiration. You've had the experience of working long and hard on a problem without any real results, and then, all of a sudden, the solution hits you. It's like someone turning on a bright light. But this wonderful experience almost never comes without our first preparing the way, and that's where the hard work comes in. Those who give up in frustration simply fail to understand that this is the way the mind operates. It's the methodical striving that makes possible the illuminating flash of insight.
We've all heard the word creative used in describing someone offbeat or different. Perhaps something like, say the guy with the strange shirt over there? He's the creative one in the office. While there might be some playful contempt in a description like that, you can bet it's mixed with a good bit of respect, even envy, for the creative one, the one who always has a fresh idea, a seemingly original answer to a problem, and chances are a wide circle of good friends who share their innovative ideas freely. But despite what some think, creative people usually don't stand out in a crowd. They're men and women of all ages and occupations, hailing from any town and every town. The trait they have in common is a strong desire to lead uncommon lives, full of positive relationships and experiences. They're ready to fulfill their potential and reap the rewards that come as a result. In this volume of thoughts from Earl Nightingale, we're encouraged to examine the life that magnifies possibilities, the creative life that's available to all of us. We learn some valuable ways to turn normal, routine thinking on its ear, with sharpened creative skills as a result. In my years of working with Earl, I found out firsthand how important creative thinking and use of creative talent was to him. In these segments, representative of nearly 40 years of work, we hear ideas on fulfilling our creative potential and ways to put our new abilities to use immediately. Why it's vital to exercise our creative muscle, and the consequences if we don't. How to identify and avoid that exhausting game, follow the follower. And we'll focus on a windfall of problem-solving methods, including one that allows us to literally see the answer to a problem. These ideas and many others will help us on our way with the methodical striving Earl mentioned a moment ago toward a life brightened with those illuminating flashes of insight that we all seek.
Processionary caterpillars travel in long, undulating lines, one creature behind the other. Jean-Henri Fabre, the French entomologist, once led a group of these caterpillars onto the rim of a large flower pot, so that the leader of the procession found himself nose to tail with the last caterpillar in the procession, forming a circle without end or beginning. Through sheer force of habit, and, of course, instinct, the ring of caterpillars circled the flower pot for 7 days and 7 nights until they died from exhaustion and starvation. An ample supply of food was close at hand and plainly visible, but it was outside the range of the circle, so the caterpillars continued along the beaten path. People often behave in a similar way. Habit patterns and ways of thinking become deeply established, and it seems easier and more comforting to follow them than to cope with change, even when change may represent freedom and achievement. If someone shouts fire, it's almost automatic to blindly follow the crowd, and many thousands have needlessly died because of it. How many stop to ask themselves, is this really the best way out of here? So many people miss the boat because it's easier and more comforting to follow without questioning the qualifications of the people just ahead, than to do some independent thinking and checking. A hard thing for most people to fully understand is that people in such numbers can be so wrong, like the caterpillars going around and around the edge of the flower pot with life and food just a short distance away. If most people are living that way, it must be right, they think. But a little checking will reveal that throughout all of recorded history, the majority of mankind has an unbroken record of being wrong about most things, especially the important things. It's difficult for people to come to the understanding that only a small minority of the people ever really get the word about life, about living abundantly and successfully. Success in the important departments of life seldom comes naturally, no more naturally than success at anything. A musical instrument, sports, fly fishing, tennis, golf, business, marriage, parenthood, landscape gardening. But somehow people wait passively for success to come to them, like the caterpillars going around in circles waiting for sustenance, following nose to tail, living as other people are living in the unspoken, tacit assumption that other people know how to live successfully. It's a good idea to step out of the line every once in a while and look up ahead to see if the line is going where we want it to go. If it is, It could be the first time. Have you ever given much thought to the value of ideas? From less than worthless, they run the gamut all the way into the hundreds of billions of dollars. From the wheel to the zipper, fire to the home permanent, the bow and arrow to the H-bomb, electricity to the ion engine, each has been drawn from that bottomless, richest of all minds, the brain of man. Everything you and I will ever have will come to us as the result of the way we use our minds, the one thing we possess that makes us different from all other creatures. And the highest function of which our minds are capable is to think creatively. This is the kind of thinking that puts a fresh new face on the world, and all of our progress has come, now comes, and will come as a result of creative thinking, from using our brains creatively. But what is a brain? Well, it's a priceless resource that is given free to each human being at birth. It's as though the Creator said, "Here you are, you now have a copy of the creative agent that produced the plays of Shakespeare, bridged San Francisco Bay, and harnessed the energy and fire of the sun. I put it into your keeping for the span of your life. Do with it what you will." Yes, you have a gold mine between your ears, your mind, your imagination. But for most of us, owning this greatest of all earthly possessions is like owning some great complex Chinese puzzle containing, at its heart, a jewel of great value. We have to find the secret key that will enable us to unlock the puzzle's treasure. Do you realize that nothing has been done perfectly? The world remains or done over. A major magazine recently reported that 1 out of every 4 products advertised in a particular issue was little more than an idea or a project in experimental laboratories 10 years ago. Today, more money is spent for research and development in a single year than was spent during the first 150 years of our nation's history. No one product has ever been manufactured, distributed, or sold as efficiently as it is, and someday will be. There isn't in all the world a perfectly managed business, organization, institution, or government. The greatest picture hasn't yet been painted. The ideal labor contract is yet unknown. The best way to train salesmen, an easy way to stay slim, something to prevent baldness, a better mousetrap, all of these problems are still unsolved. Physics, mathematics, and chemistry are still being revised. Psychology, sociology, and economics await another Darwin. Nothing is known completely and positively. Nothing has been done finally and right. Everything changes. So the world waits, and then moves forward in surges as here a man and there a woman makes a fresh and daring discovery or proposes some bold new ideas. And most of these contributions to social and scientific progress come from creative individuals who have the courage and strength to challenge and break the bonds of conventional, routine, average thinking. Yes, in this swift-moving world, there's tremendous opportunity for the men and women who use more of their total brain power. So, use your mind to think about the things which need to be done or done over, starting right where you are today. Your brain is always ready for instant use. It thrives on exercise. How about giving it some right now? The best way to exercise your brain is to ask yourself questions. So try these. 1. How can I improve myself so that I can become a better person? 2. How can I get along better with my customers, colleagues, friends, family? 3. What can I do to increase my value and advance faster in my organization? 4. How can I come up with new ideas for advancing my profession or improving the business I'm in? Think about how you can create something in your work, in your life. Remember, nothing is done. Nothing is final and complete. You've done important, significant things in the past, and you can do more if you will use more of your full brain power, now and in the years ahead. Imagination is everything. I can't remember who wrote those 3 words in that order, but it seems he summed up it all. Imagination is everything. As we reach successive plateaus in life, we begin to imagine ourselves reaching the next one, and thus our imaginations lead us on from one idea to another through every day and every year of our lives. But if we're not careful, Our imaginations can lead us into mazes of confused complications from which we may find it difficult to extricate ourselves. So it's a good idea, as we use our imagination, to always strive for simplicity, to avoid the complicated. Are we living the lives we want to live, or are we living stereotyped lives based on phony values? Usually they're a combination of both, a kind of compromise which says surely other people must have some idea of what constitutes the good life. After all, there are so many of them. But when we look closer, we see that they're living shadow lives, as Mumford calls them. In competition, ice skating, you've seen a couple match each other's movements almost perfectly. It's called shadow skating, I believe. They try to match each other's movements so perfectly that each might be the other's shadow. In any sort of neighborhood, you will tend to find people living much the same way. Their homes, landscaping, furnishings, and lives are typified, if by anything at all, by an almost total lack of imagination. Imagination, like anything else, needs fuel for production. You can't have something from nothing. Thomas Edison said, "I'm a sponge. I want to know the answer to everything." With his great lifetime inventory of information, he could assemble an incredible array of new combinations and permutations. Electric light is a combination of elements, and so is any good idea, or any bad idea for that matter. Most of us make the mistake of not asking why. Why do I live here, in this house, rather than in some other house? Why this life instead of another life? Why this work instead of other work? Why these rewards instead of others? Now, this doesn't mean we'll change anything necessarily, but at least we'll be living lives that have been examined and found to be to our personal liking. We'll know that we're not living the lives we're living simply because they reflect and are pretty much composite copies of the lives we see about us. There should be, to my way of thinking, deep main currents in our lives. Our family lives, our work, and our leisure, and our rewards in the form of income. Our family lives should be good and richly satisfying. What is our input here? How are we using our imaginations to bring meaning, charm, and love to our family relationships? It's an ongoing process that should become richer and more meaningful with the passing of time. How about your home? Is it what you want? H.L. Mencken once commented that the average home is a house of horrors and doesn't reflect poor taste so much as it reflects no taste at all. People tend to order their steaks medium, and their homes and lives the same way. Medium rhymes with tedium. The family is the most important part of the life of most of us. What good is accomplishment if there's no one with whom to share it? What good is anything if there's no one with whom to share it? And since the family is first in importance, it represents a fertile field for the imagination, not just for the woman in the family, but for the man, and hopefully the kids as well. Family creative thinking sessions are a lot of fun and a never-ending source of good ideas. Check every idea for basic simplicity. Avoid complication whenever possible. No matter what it is we want, if it's within the realm of reality, we can get it through imagination applied to our work. Nothing now being done by man is being done the way it can and will be. Everything will be done much better. Not can be, will be. Whether it's the result of our applied imagination or not. People who resist change in their work are impediments to progress, yet the first words the new person on the job usually hears are, "Now this is the way it's done around here." A business leader made the comment that if we're doing anything this year the way it was done last year, we're obsolete. Now that's an extreme generalization, but deserves careful attention. In most things, it's true.
If you see difficulty living like a processionary caterpillar, or if you want to change from doing your job in the same tired way, you're probably asking questions like, how can I improve? Or how can I implement? By asking these questions, you're taking the vital early steps in the creative thinking process. You're beginning to exercise your brain and put your imagination to work. We'll hear more of Earl's comments on the imagination in later volumes, but here it's important to introduce it as the starting block of creative thinking. For almost anything that can be imagined can be brought to fruition by the mind of the creative thinker. Exactly who is the creative person, and what are the qualities that foster his fresh thinking? We'll examine that along with comments on distinct switches of the brain and 4 suggestions for generating creativity.
Some friends and I were talking about the limitless power of the human brain and how each of us is given one of these amazing do-it-yourself gold mines at birth as standard equipment. But the experts say that most people never get their brains out of low gear. They let others do their thinking for them. It's said that man's brain has 4 powers. 1, the power to absorb information and knowledge. We do this by using our 5 senses. 2, the brain has the power of retention, the ability to store all the bits and pieces of information it's fed and recall them when necessary. 3, the power of making judgments, using logic and coming to intelligent conclusions or decisions. And 4, the brain displays the power of imagination, the ability to think creatively. Put another way, we have 4 switches in our minds. Turn on switch number 1, and we gather information. Switch number 2 snaps on our retentive powers. Number 3 clicks on our judgment. And number 4 is the switch called imagination, the creative power to take various known factors and put them all together into a new or better form. This last one, while it's probably the most important and rewarding, unfortunately rusts out in the majority of people, and usually at a fairly early age. When we were children, we used the imagination switch all the time. The world of the small child is a world filled with the wonders and joy of his fertile and active imagination. But as we grow older, we're seldom encouraged to use the imaginative powers we spent our childhood cultivating. Instead, we're taught to conform, to face so-called reality, to follow the crowd. And that's exactly what we should not do. Our ideas are often met with sneers, sarcastic laughter, or comments such as, "That's a crazy idea," or "It won't work," or "It's never been done that way before." The first thing a person on a new job usually hears is, "Now this is the way we do things around here." He's seldom told, "But if you can find a new and better way, tell us about it." Usually, creativity is stifled. So here are some tips for generating creativity. 1, recognize that ideas can come from anyone, anywhere, at any time. 2, ideas, particularly in their early stages of development, demand care and attention. Write down all your ideas. Keep an idea file. 3, ideas need encouragement. Treat your ideas and the ideas of others with extreme care. Encourage creative thinking in others and yourself. And 4, keep in mind that creative thinking, coming up with ideas, is like mining for diamonds in the world's richest soil. You'll get mostly small ones, but if you stay with it, you can find that big one you're looking for, too. Creative thinking adds zest and interest to life. It brings about refreshing change and keeps us young. You have a gold mine between your ears. It's a pity not to dig in it. Decide upon what you want to do, and turn on switch number 4, your creative imagination. John W. Gardner has pointed out that the image created by those who live on the fringes of society and by most of their predecessors going back to the 19th century Bohemians has led us to suppose that people of high originality are somehow lawless. But the truly creative man is not an outlaw, but a lawmaker. Every great creative performance since the initial one, he writes, has been in some measure a bringing of order out of chaos. It's a good quotation. Many people seem to believe that the most creative people are strange, neurotic, and eccentric, and live their lives on the outer edges of civilized society. It's not true. The truly creative person does not seek to destroy the existing order. It's the misfit who does that. The creative person simply tries to improve it. He's not a tearer down, he's a builder up. Moreover, the truly creative person tends to be rather conservative in his personal habits, in his dress, in his home. There are exceptions, of course, but for the most part, the most creative people in society would not stand out as being different in a room full of people. What the creative person does do is see things not as they are, but as they could be. He lives in that third language, the language of the hope, of the future, of the imagination. Nor are creative persons found in just a few fields, such as the arts, the theater, advertising, inventing, and so on. They're to be found in every field, every walk of life. Many of them earn their livelihoods through their creativity. Many more are creative just for the fun of it, or perhaps because they couldn't be any other way even if they wanted to. Far more people are genuinely creative than you might suspect. The great thing about using your mind creatively is that this ability improves with age. It's one of the great compensations for growing older. It's great, too, for young people, but every year of experience adds to the fund of possible combinations for new and better ideas. The recent, and to some extent the present romper room era in the advertising business is really nothing new. Eric Hoffer has pointed out that throughout history, the great creative geniuses and innovators have been quite young. And the graybeards who head various industries today were themselves tremendously creative when they were young and just getting started. And they're even more creative today if they haven't let the status quo sneak up on them and harden their channels of creativity. We've found that creative people, though they may be dissimilar in many respects, have certain attitudes and employ certain techniques to their own benefit and to the benefit of us all. I'd like now to use these techniques and attitudes as the basis for a descriptive sketch of a creative person. As we go through this verbal sketch, I'd like you to think about this person. Where and when have you seen him or her? Is this a person you know at work or in your neighborhood or right at home? It'll be helpful to listen to this message frequently and be reminded of these techniques and attitudes which, if practiced regularly, will result in your living an even more creative, rewarding life. Another good idea is to project the image of the creative person on your own actions, then judge for yourself what areas could stand some improvement. First of all, the creative person realizes that his mind is an inexhaustible storehouse. It can provide anything he earnestly wants in life. But in order to draw from this storehouse, he must constantly augment its stock of information, thoughts, and wisdom. His mind gives him ideas, and ideas solve problems. The person we're talking about has a carefully thought out and clearly defined set of goals toward which he's working. By knowing where he's going and determining to get there, he gives meaning and purpose to his daily work, to everything he does. He never wastes time just drifting. He's always in control of his life. The creative person knows his brain thrives on exercise, so he uses a part of each day for thinking imaginatively about three things: himself, his work, and his fellow man. By asking himself questions involving these three areas, he's prospecting in the richest gold mine ever known, and the answers to his questions are often ideas that he can put into immediate action. He reaches out for ideas. He respects the minds of others, gives credit to their mental abilities. Everyone has ideas, they're free, and many of them are excellent. By first listening to ideas and then thinking them through before judging them, the creative person avoids prejudice and closed-mindedness. This is the way he maintains a creative climate around himself. You know, ideas are like slippery fish. They seem to have a peculiar knack of getting away from us. Because of this, the creative person always has a pad and pencil handy. When he gets an idea, he writes it down. He knows that many people have found their whole lives changed by a single great thought. By capturing ideas immediately, he doesn't risk forgetting them. And these captured ideas are deposited in idea banks, 8.5 by 11-inch envelopes which are labeled with topics of interest. A friend of mine, a very successful writer, writes his books this way. He labels each envelope with the name of a chapter. Then, whenever he gets an idea or finds new material, he sees that it gets into the proper envelope. Before long, his book has practically written itself. Having a sincere interest in people, our creative person listens carefully when someone else is talking. He's intensely observant, absorbing everything he sees and hears. He behaves as if everyone he meets wears a sign that reads, "I am the most important person on earth." Thus he makes it a point always to talk with other people's interests in mind, and it pays off in a flood of new ideas and information which would otherwise be lost to him forever. Widening his circle of friends and broadening his base of knowledge are two more very effective techniques of the creative person. If he's staying at a hotel where there's a convention not allied to his own work, he'll drop in on it, practically written itself. Having a sincere interest in people, our creative person listens carefully when someone else is talking. He's intensely observant, absorbing everything he sees and hears. He behaves as if everyone he meets wears a sign that reads, "I am the most important person on earth." Thus he makes it a point always to talk with other people's interests in mind, and it pays off in a flood of new ideas and information which would otherwise be lost to him forever. Widening his circle of friends and broadening his base of knowledge are two more very effective techniques of the creative person. If he's staying at a hotel where there's a convention not allied to his own work, he'll drop in on it, make new friends, and listen for ideas that might help him. He's always looking for better ways to do his work and live his life. The creative person anticipates achievement. He expects to win, and the above-average production engendered by this kind of attitude affects those around him in a positive way. He's a plus factor for all who know him. You know, problems are challenges to creative minds. Without problems, there'd be little reason to think at all. Welcoming them as normal and predictable parts of living singles him out as an above-average person. He knows it's a waste of time merely to worry about problems, so he wisely invests the same time and energy in solving problems. He has an organized approach to problem solving. It might involve the 8 steps described in your worksheet for creative problem solving. He can even avoid problems by anticipating potentially troublesome areas and doing something about them before they turn sour on him. The research and development departments of many leading companies are constantly involved in exactly this sort of advanced planning. The creative person knows the value of giving himself and his ideas away. He's a go-giver as well as a go-getter. The hand that gives always gathers, and doing things for other people is a vital part of his way of life. When the creative person gets an idea, he puts it through a series of steps designed to improve it. He thinks in new directions. He builds big ideas from little ones, new ideas from old ones, associating ideas, combining them, adapting, substituting, magnifying, minifying, rearranging, and reversing ideas. He steers clear of mind weakeners, noise, fatigue, needless worry, unbalanced diets, overindulgence in food or drink, and people with negative attitudes. He asks polite, probing questions that bolster the ego and expand the mind. Questions are the creative acts of the intelligence, and he uses them often and to everyone's advantage. And the creative person uses his spare time wisely. He knows that many of the great ideas, books, and inventions were conceived during the creator's spare time. We all have the same number of minutes in a day, and the creative person values each one of them. Do you recognize the person in this message? Well, he's someone you ought to know. As you use these suggestions and creativity aids you've learned in this program to further increase your personal potential, I believe you'll soon discover this person's identity, and you'll be pleased with your own enhanced ability.
Whether earning a livelihood through it or just enjoying life more because of it, creativity becomes vital to the very being. Creative people couldn't be any other way, even if they wanted to. And while some people use their abilities more than others, everyone can further his skill by starting to think about everything imaginatively, by respecting and listening to the ideas of others, and by giving ideas away. Someone else just might bring one of them into a completely new light. And always expect to win. Anticipate achievement as a result and a reward of your creativity. We continue with more ideas on developing creative talent. Also, we discover what happens when outlets for applied imagination become dammed up. As a master at weaving the words of great thinkers into an accessible fabric of wisdom, Earl was not the first to suggest that all people possess creative talent, but he was certainly one of the most convincing. Through his seminars and media work, he encouraged people to find and use their unique talents in any and every endeavor. He felt that some resigned themselves to an odd sort of comfort by unfavorably comparing themselves to the great inventors and innovators of the ages. In other words, since I can't make big, important creative leaps, why try at all? The reason we must try to make our own imaginative contribution to the world will be revealed in a moment. Unheard since it was broadcast in 1953, this radio program segment shows that even as a young man, Earl had an intense desire to help people reach their creative potential. He was fond of paraphrasing this Ben Franklin truth: to cease to think creatively is but little different from ceasing to live.
Although it's impossible to lift ourselves over a fence by our bootstraps, it is possible. It can be easy. to lift ourselves over life's obstacles by the force of our applied imagination. And how many of us use it, huh? Very few. I tell you, even when bodies go out of whack, heightened creative effort may be as helpful as surgery or drugs. Betsy Barton is one source for this statement. Through her early years, she was light-hearted, light-footed, and full of fun. Then, in her early teens, riding home with her brother one evening, her car overturned, and she was maimed. After several operations by the world's best surgeons, she was told that her spinal cord had been severed and could not be respliced. It was almost as hard for her to walk as if she had no legs at all. But by exercise and courage, she at last made herself walk well enough to demonstrate to returning legless veterans how they too could walk again. Today she's a charming, cheerful doer of great and good deeds. Now, apart from exercise, it was creative activity, above all else, which enabled this fine woman to remake her life. She heroically fanned her creative spark until it flamed with a health-giving heat. And for one who had never thought she could write, she became a truly great writer, as her new novel has so eloquently proved. For one who had done no art except little girl scribbles, she learned to paint like a professional. Betsy Barton has pointed out that many a creative great has been diseased or handicapped. Keats is the most famous, she says, but Thomas Mann and Noel Coward have never been fully well. Catherine Mansfield, Emerson, Thoreau were all sickly. Hausman said he did his best work when he fell ill. So Alex Osborne asked her, but instead of being any richer in talent while unwell, could it be that those writers instinctively sought to forget their ills by losing themselves in supreme effort? Couldn't they actually make themselves feel better by acquiring the glow that comes from thinking up something worthwhile? And she said yes. We all know the sense of well-being that flows from just having an idea and putting it into words or action. Even by writing an amusing letter, we can add a spark to our daily lives. She said there is no question but that the more we try to create, the better we feel. And this holds true with both the well and the unwell. You know, it's a funny thing, but to most people, work and fun can never be synonymous. But the fact is that creative work can be fun. By and large, no people enjoy their toil as much as those who deal in ideas. Did you know that? They enjoy their work more than anybody else. Movie makers, authors, artists, advertising men, reporters, stylists, creative researchers are prone to gripe that stomach ulcers are the wound stripes of their professions. But at heart they know that although necessity is often the mother of creative effort, fun is often the father. People can get more fun out of life by making more of their imaginations, but creative effort offers still another compensation. A person can make himself grow by making his creative spark glow. Building one's own stature by heightening one's creative energy is, as Phelan said, like lifting yourself up by your bootstraps. But as Joseph Jastrow has written, strange as this seems, there is plenty of proof that it is really so. Yes, the more creative you are, the more of a person you become. The more you rub your creative lamp, the more alive you feel, and the more alive will be everyone with whom you come in contact. Your children, your husband, your wife, your friends and relatives. Of course, the cash rewards of creative effort are plenty, and there's plenty to go around. But the more frequent and more fruitful rewards come in the coin of happier living. And who could ask for anything more than that, huh? Now, especially in our earlier years, all of us possess a creative urge. Now, when this yin has too little outlet, frustration sets in, and such frustration undermines happiness. Our talents are constantly craving outlet. More than that, they're constantly craving development. When we dam them up, they torment us. Thus, the cause of our discontent can often be traced to failure to exercise our creative aptitudes. Did you know that all of us are born with creative talent? It's true. Altogether too much emphasis has been placed on this routine, this old hogwash about people being born to be a certain way, being born to be poor, or being born to be this, or being born to be that. That's nothing but a bunch of swill. A person can become just about what he wants to become. All of us are blessed with some degree of imagination. Even when it comes to art, creativity is no rarity. And imaginative power bears but little relationship to schooling, as illustrated by the story about the Texas cattleman. This Texas cattle raiser saw an Illinois car approaching his home. So he dashed into the kitchen to his cook and he said, "A big packer from up north is coming in. When I was in Chicago, I boasted to him that we have a bull here on the ranch that races the Sunset Limited 25 miles across our ranch every morning and always wins." The man wanted to see the critter, and now he's here. You've got to handle him. I've gone away. Well, he just sneaked out. So the cook went to the front and greeted the visitor with the explanation that his boss had just left for New Orleans, then to Jacksonville and Atlanta, then to New York, then to Toronto, then to Cleveland and Cincinnati, on the way to Chicago, then St. Louis, then to Denver, then to Seattle, then home after a visit in Hollywood. So the Illinois visitor said, "Wow, what a trip." He says, "How long before you'll be back?" So the cook says, 2 days. He said, 2 days? How's he traveling, in a jet plane? And the cook said, "No, sir. He's riding bareback. He's riding on that fast-running bull of his." Well, that's creative imagination. To be a problem solver, we do not have to have the talent of a genius such as Leonardo da Vinci. Called the most versatile human being who ever lived, he gave birth to thousands of brain children. Many of his ideas were 500 years ahead of his time. Did you know, for example, that 500 years ago, over 500 years ago, Leonardo da Vinci invented in his mind a self-driven automobile, various gear combinations, roller bearings, air conditioning, excavating machines, hydraulic tools, airplanes, helicopters, submarines. He also created masterpieces of sculpture, painting, music, and architecture. But we shouldn't let a record like that stop us from trying to be more creative in lesser ways. The least we should say to ourselves is that if Da Vinci could do that much, surely we can put our creative talent to a greater use than we do. In the words of Lord Macaulay, the imaginations of most of us are like the wings of an ostrich. They enable us to run, though not to soar. But many of us don't even walk. We either stand still creatively, or worse than that, we slide back from an imaginative childhood into a non-creative adulthood. Gustave Flaubert said, "Talent is our affair. We can shrivel it through disuse, or we can build it up by practicing creativity, by solving problems, by using our leisure in ways that will exercise our imagination until we become happy, vital, intelligent people."
Creative and productive people are not creative and productive for the benefit of others. It's because they're driven by the need to be creative and productive. They'd be creative and productive if they each lived on a deserted island and simply had to stack what he produced in a big pile with no one benefiting or even aware of what he was doing. You'll hear people say that we're happiest when we're serving others, and that's true, but it's not true because of any great altruism on our part. It's true because we experience the joy of producing something. That others benefit from it is fine, but only secondary. It's good to know that others benefit from and what we produce. There's satisfaction in that, ego satisfaction, and the desire to produce more. If everyone continually rejected our creative or productive efforts, we might become sullen and resentful. We might even stop all efforts for a while. But eventually, we'd begin to produce again in the hope that eventually someone would see the sense of what we're doing. This is the story of the painters who were before their time. Renoir, who was laughed at and rejected not only by the public, but by his own fellow artists. We look at a painting by Renoir today and marvel that anything so fine and beautiful could have ever been an object of scorn. And he painted thousands of paintings. He went right on producing them. When he brought one of his canvases to one of the most eminent Parisian teachers, the expert glanced at the work and said, "You are, I presume, dabbling in paint to amuse yourself." And Renoir replied, "Of course. When it ceases to amuse me, I'll stop painting." Everything he painted delighted him, and he painted everything. Even Manet said to Monet, "Renoir has no talent at all. You who are his friend should tell him kindly to give up painting." A group of artists who were rejected by the establishment of their time formed their own association in self-defense. Do you know who were in that group? They were Degas, Pissarro, Monet, Cézanne, and Renoir, 5 of the greatest artists of all time, all doing what they believed in the face of total rejection. Since we're on the subject of Renoir, in his later life he suffered terribly, from rheumatism, especially in his hands. He lived in constant pain. And when Matisse visited the aging painter, he saw that every stroke was causing renewed pain, and he asked, "Why do you still have to work? Why continue to torture yourself?" And Renoir answered, "The pain passes, but the pleasure, the creation of beauty remains." One day when he was 78 and quite famous and successful, finally he said, "I'm still making progress." And the next day he was dead. This is the mark of the creative, productive person. Still making progress, still learning, still producing as long as he lives, despite pain or problems of all kinds. Not producing for the joy or satisfaction of others, but because he must, because it gives him pleasure and satisfaction.
The need to exercise creative talent transcends illness and pain. From creation springs joy, whether to the writer, artist, entrepreneur, or businesswoman. The fruit of one's creativity in many cases affects others in countless profound ways. Earl has a few things to say now about your most valuable creative tools, questions, and what kind of questions benefit the curious student of applied imagination. We'll discover 7 ways to freshen up your thought processes and sharpen creativity, and as a result, start solving problems methodically, not randomly.
Creative people are invariably intelligent people, and they're curious about themselves, those around them, and the world in which they live. This is the kind of curiosity that's been called one of the permanent and certain characteristics of a vigorous intellect. Questions are the creative acts of the intelligence, and the questions that work hardest for us and bring us the greatest amount of useful information are the open-ended questions. Now, these are questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. They're asked by using the 6 W's, H and I technique. Who, what, when, where, why, which, how, and if. Rudyard Kipling put it this way: "I had 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names were where and what and when, and why and how and who." All we're doing is adding 2 more, which and if. Now, this isn't entirely new to us. We employed the 6 W's, H, and I all the time when we were children. Have you ever tried to count the number of times each day a 4 or 5-year-old uses the word why? You see, each question a child asks is an attempt to add to his limited knowledge. When adults lose patience with this constant barrage of questions, the child either finds some other way of getting the information or just forgets the whole thing, thereby neglecting a valuable tool he'll want later in life, the open-ended question. Now, as adults, we know that inside the mind of each person we meet, there is some knowledge that could benefit us if only we could learn what it is. The open-ended question technique really opens people up. By asking open-ended questions, we get people to remove the barriers that normally keep this information out of our grasp. Human beings like to talk about things that interest them. Open-ended questions let people know we want to hear their ideas, opinions, and thoughts. Each of us has 2 ears and 1 mouth, and it seems to be a good idea to do at least twice as much listening as talking. An old Texas friend of mine used to say, "You ain't learning nothing while you're talking." But the object of asking open-ended questions isn't merely to get other people to talk. We could spend days standing around gabbing with people who have very little to say that would benefit us. Instead, the object of our who, what, when, where, why, which, how, and if questions is to gather, absorb, and utilize that information which will be useful to us, move us ahead in the fields of our own interests and endeavors. But in so doing, we're also employing the best technique known for making friends, for success in human relations, and for selling our own ideas. Oddly enough, the more we listen, the better conversationalist we seem to the person doing the talking. One of this country's top newsmen set a good example of this kind of purposeful questioning. He knew how to ask open-ended questions so provocatively that he could almost always get world leaders to give him exclusive interviews. His wise questions earned him the highest position in his field, that of chief executive for one of the great news services. And the open-ended question is equally useful to the businessman. Suppose, for instance, that you've just met a Mr. Smith who's an official of a company operating in an area different from your own. Instead of talking about the weather, you might ask him, "Mr. Smith, how did you get into your line of work?" Here's a man who obviously has some degree of success in business, so you stand an excellent chance of learning something that will be useful to you. One of the best salesmen I know uses open-ended questions to great advantage when he's talking with a prospect. Instead of saying, "We make the best thingamabob in the world," he asks, "Mr. Prospect, when you buy thingamabobs, what features are most important to you?" Here's an effective method for taking people off the offensive, for getting them to talk to your advantage. This technique works well for anyone who will give some thought to what he's going to say, rather than just blurting out the first thing that pops into his mind. So ask, skillfully, probing, open-ended questions, and ask them in a sincere, courteous manner. Anyone who uses the 6 W's, H and I technique wisely, courteously, and with those people who can contribute something to his understanding, will quickly find this to be one of his most useful creative techniques. The best way I know to practice asking open-ended questions is to try out a few on myself. If this sounds like a good idea, you might want to try it too. Ask yourself, who has a greater knowledge of my job than I? What can I do to learn some of the things he knows, but I don't? Why must my job be done this way? And if there is a better way to do my job, what would it be? The housewife and the student can make up a similar set of questions that will be just as stimulating in their own fields. Take time to ponder these questions. Their answers, the facts and information you'll gain, can make your life infinitely more interesting and rewarding. And whenever you talk with others, use lots of open-ended questions. They're your most valuable creative tools. Now we're ready to examine the best techniques for using our creative faculties more effectively to solve problems, make decisions, achieve goals, and better fulfill our ultimate responsibility as human beings, to think. Have you ever considered that you can think in various ways? Let's look at some ways to think. First, think association. An example of thinking association is that the best way to remember names is to associate them with familiar objects or words. Two more examples of thinking association are the key word and the association list techniques. The key word technique is used by people who want to remember a series of ideas. They join the initial letters of the idea words together to form a simple key word. By remembering the key word, they can recall the whole series of ideas. An association list is used by memory experts to recall prodigious lists of articles by associating each one with another article in a previously memorized list. The creative person is forever associating ideas and continually searching for associative relationships. Next, think combination. Almost everything in nature is a combination of elements. You're quite a combination yourself. Scientists calculate that if the energy in the hydrogen atoms of your body could be utilized, you could supply all the electrical needs of the entire country for nearly a week. A DuPont scientist says that the atoms of your body contain a potential energy of more than 11 million kilowatt hours per pound. A simple pencil is a combination of wood, carbon, rubber, paint, metal. A few more examples might include ham and eggs, pie a la mode, radio, TV, and record player combinations, and orbiting satellites combined with microwave telephone relay stations. Somebody dreamed up the idea of combining comedy and music, and musical comedy was born. You can come up with some really great ideas by finding new combinations yourself. Everything you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell during the day offers opportunity to consider new combinations. When you brush your teeth, you might think of a toothbrush that contains the toothpaste and the handle. You might combine your mirror with a motto reminding you to start the day right. It might read, "How can I increase my service today?" Or, "Today is the only time I've got. I'll use it well." So let's think combination. Next, think adaptation. Burlap fabric, originally used for making gunny sacks, has been adapted for drapes, wall covering, and stylish dresses. Some salesmen were thinking adaptation. Airplane seat belts have been adapted for use in automobiles to bring new safety to highway driving. The phonograph record and motion picture, originally developed for entertainment, are today adapted for instruction and education. Rocket motors, which were developed to propel atomic missiles, have been adapted to lift peaceful space vehicles into orbital and interplanetary flight. During the next year, you're going to see the result of people thinking adaptation and coming up with ideas worth thousands of dollars. Why couldn't one of these people be you? The only limit to what you can achieve by adapting old products to new uses, old methods to new applications, is the limit of your own creativity. Next, think substitution. When you think substitution, you ask yourself how you might substitute a different material or thing for the one now used. For example, plastic is used as a substitute for wood and metal. Aluminum is a substitute for other metals. Stainless steel is often substituted for chrome. The transistor often replaces the vacuum tube. Old weathered planking can be used as a substitute for a conventional wall in a family room or study with dramatic and interesting effect. In short, don't assume that because a particular thing has always been used in the past that you have to use it now. Perhaps there's a substitute that will work better, or last longer, or cost less, or be lighter, or more colorful, and so forth. Let's think substitution. Next, think magnification. Think big. Example, skyscrapers, the Pentagon, king-size soft drinks, giant economy-size packages. What do you work with that might be made larger? Or think minification. Think small. Examples, the solar battery, the transistor, the compact car, tiny radios that fit into your pocket, small portable TV sets, smaller size food products. How about the bikini? That's certainly thinking small. And now to keep your mind moving, think rearrangement. That is, turn things around, backward, upside down, or inside out. An interesting example of this was when someone came up with the idea of putting the mink on the inside of a woman's coat. All the warmth, luxury, and status of full-length mink in a casual coat. And it's nothing more than a mink coat turned inside out. Another good example of this is the building with its skeletal framework outside. The building is suspended inside. Insects have their skeletons outside. We have ours inside. They both work fine. What do you work with that can benefit from this kind of thinking? What can you turn around, revolutionize? Rearrange things, change pace, alter sequence, think of modifying, changing color, motion, timing, sound, odor, form, and shape. This type of thinking works for everyone. Salesmen use these creative techniques to discover new applications for products or services, new ways of emphasizing customer benefits, new ideas to solve customer problems, better ways to organize their time and effort. Summing up, if you want to spur your mind to new action, think combination, association, adaptation, substitution, magnification, minification, and rearrangement. If at first you literally force your mind to think in all these 7 ways, you'll probably be amazed with the ideas you develop. And before long, you'll find yourself thinking in each of these ways as a matter of course. This kind of thinking increases the scope of your mind power and enables you to achieve fuller use of your brain. Your mind has an infinite variety of things it can do and an infinite capacity for work. Let it work for you. Take nothing for granted. Everything can and will be changed, improved. The only thing you can count on for certain is change. Don't wait for it. Be in the forefront. Help bring it about.
Here's a little story to test how good a thinker you are. Many years ago, when a person who owed money could be thrown into jail, a merchant in London had the misfortune to owe a huge sum to a mean moneylender. The moneylender, who was old and ugly, fancied the merchant's beautiful young daughter, and he proposed a bargain. He said he'd cancel the merchant's debt if he could have the girl instead. Well, both the merchant and his daughter were horrified at the suggestion, so the cunning moneylender proposed that they let Providence decide the matter. He told them that he'd put a black pebble and a white pebble into an empty money bag, and then the girl would have to pick out one of the pebbles. If she chose the black pebble, she would become his wife, and her father's debt would be canceled. If she chose the white pebble, she would stay with her father, and the debt would still be canceled. But if she refused to pick a pebble, Her father would be thrown into jail, and she would starve. Well, reluctantly, the merchant agreed. They were standing on a pebble-strewn path in the merchant's garden at the time as they talked, and he stooped down to pick up the 2 pebbles. As he did, the girl, sharp-eyed with fright, noticed that he picked up 2 black pebbles and put them into the money bag. He wasn't taking any chances. He then asked the girl to pick out the pebble that was to decide her fate and that of her father. Now imagine you were standing on that path in the merchant's garden. What would you have done if you had been the girl? If you had to advise her, what would you have advised her to do? Now, what type of thinking would you use to solve the problem? You may think that careful logical analysis must solve the problem if there's a solution. This type of thinking is straightforward, vertical thinking. The other type of thinking is lateral thinking. Vertical thinkers are usually not of much help to a girl in this situation. The way they analyze it, there are 3 possibilities. 1, the girl should refuse to take a pebble. 2, the girl should show that there are 2 black pebbles in the bag and expose the moneylender as a cheat. 3, the girl should take a black pebble and sacrifice herself in order to save her father from prison. Well, none of these suggestions is very helpful, for if the girl does take a pebble, then she has to marry the moneylender. If not, her father goes to prison. Well, the girl in the story put her hand into the money bag and drew out a pebble. Without looking at it, she fumbled and let it fall to the path where it was immediately lost among all the others. "Oh, how clumsy of me," she said. "But never mind. Just look in the bag. You'll be able to tell which pebble I took by the color of the one that's remaining." Since the remaining pebble is, of course, black, it must be assumed that she's taken the white pebble, since the moneylender dare not admit his dishonesty. That's what's called lateral thinking. It not only solves problems, but it also improves on the situation. It's a well-established, yet always surprising bit of knowledge that the answer to even our most pressing problem, provided, of course, that it lies within the realm of human solution, is usually at hand. It requires, however, a different kind of insight to see it. Children seem to be better at lateral thinking than grown-ups, unless grown-ups work at it and practice it. We all were highly creative children at one time, before we had it worn off or knocked out of us by unimaginative, dull adults. The management of a large electronics firm had struggled for months with a production problem that resisted all its efforts to solve. There were 9 women working on that particular assembly line, and finally, in desperation, the management people asked their help in solving the problem. They solved it in a week, and in so doing greatly reduced the cost of producing the product. They'd been producing it the old way because that's what they had been told to do. They hadn't been asked to do it the best way they could think of. Go to work on your problems in the same way if you're in a problem-solving kind of work. If you're not in the problem-solving kind of work, you're unemployed. I understand that it's particularly difficult for professional people to think creatively and laterally. It's because they've been so thoroughly conditioned by their education. They've always been told what to do, and they've been told how it's always been done, and they were never asked how to do it better.
You may have already put lateral thinking to work in your problem-solving regimen. If so, you know that this kind of thinking is not something you learn step by step, but a result of practicing the thinking variations mentioned a few moments ago. The 7 major areas are association, combination and adaptation, then substitution, magnification, minification, and rearrangement. Keep these techniques in mind as you move on to a closer look at problem solving. two major areas. First, some problem-solving methods, including different types of brainstorming, and a rating system to analyze the viability of a chosen solution. Earl suggests ways to implement solutions and follow through with a planned daily system of creative thinking. Earl was fond of brainstorming sessions. A group of us would be in a room talking through a problem or working and reworking a new idea. At the point where we thought we had a breakthrough, or at least an acceptable solution, I remember him challenging us to take another walk around the issue, to look at it from new angles and try stretching it and improving it. In other words, to use original thinking instead of rut thinking. After all, that's what separates the creative thinkers from everybody else.
What are the similarities in problem solving, decision making, and goal achievement? Actually, they're alike in many ways. A decision that must be made is little more than a problem awaiting a solution. We might even call it a simple problem. When we're faced with a decision, we rarely have to choose between more than 2 or 3 alternatives, whereas in solving a problem, we sometimes face what seems to be an endless list of possibilities. And what about goal achievement? Isn't a goal a point we wish to reach? The problem is to move from where we are now to where we want to be. So you see, problem solving, decision making, and goal achievement are all closely related functions of creative thinking. It's important that we keep this in mind. The first step in solving any problem is to define it. We should always be sure we understand the problem before we go to work on its solution. Now here you should write down everything you know about the problem. This information might come from your own experience or from books which contain background and statistical data, or from friends and business associates who know something about the area in which the problem lies. Third, who to see. List the names of people and organizations that are recognized authorities on the problem. This is your opportunity to go all out for facts. After determining who can help you, contact them, talk with them, pick their brains for all the information they possess that can help you solve the problem. After doing this, be sure to make a note of each thing that's germane to the problem. Don't risk forgetting anything that could help you find the best solution. The fifth step in solving a problem creatively is called individual ideation. This is personal brainstorming, thinking with the brakes of judgment off. Don't try to decide whether an idea is good or bad. Just write it down the moment it comes to you. You can pick and choose, rate these ideas later. Right now, all you're after is a lot of ideas. Now, here are the 4 rules for brainstorming. 1, no negative thinking. 2, the wilder the ideas, the better. 3, a large number of ideas is essential. And 4, combination and improvement of ideas is what you're after. One idea often leads to another, a better idea. Don't worry if some of your ideas seem far-fetched or impractical. You're looking for all the ideas you can possibly find. Don't reject any. Write them all down. Then, when you have all your ideas written down, rate them for effectiveness and facility. The effectiveness scale ranges from very effective to probably effective to doubtful. And the facility scale ranges from easy to not so easy to difficult. This rating of ideas will clearly indicate the likely success of any possible solution. Of course, it's best to consider first the idea or ideas that are rated both very effective and easy. This is your opportunity to put the minds of others to work on the problem. The group brainstorm. Handle this session the same way you did your individual ideation. No negative thinking, no criticism at this stage. The wilder the ideas, the better. Get as many ideas as possible and try for idea combination and improvement. Write down all the ideas the group comes up with. Then, after all the possible solutions are in, screen them as you did earlier for their predictable effectiveness and ease of implementation. Be careful, though, not to pass judgment on any idea while the brainstorm is in progress. It's sure death to brainstorming. The rating always comes last. We'll go into this more thoroughly in the next message. Of course, you may not want group brainstorming on every problem. If you don't, just skip this step and go on to the next one. 7th, list all the ideas that have received the highest ratings. Then estimate the time and cost involved in implementing each of these ideas. This is your schedule for putting the best ideas to work. When you've written an idea into your action plan, decide who might do it, when it might be done, where to start, and how to do it. These are important considerations. Be certain to give yourself a deadline for putting your plan into action. We work hardest and most efficiently when we know there's a definite time element involved. So make a note of the date when you must put your solution to work. It's good to remember that timing is often critical when a new idea is introduced. So carefully calculate the deadline date in the light of the general situation. You also might like to write down a second date, the one by which you intend to have the action completed, the problem solved. Remember what was said earlier about problem solving, decision making, and goal achievement? They have a great deal in common. They can all be attacked in much the same way. You know, for any problem, no matter how big or complex it may be, there is a solution. All you have to do is find it. And you can find it by organizing your approach, by attacking the problem methodically and with determination, by working long and hard, by applying your full brain power, by using wisely all the help you can get. You can solve it.
There's only one way to defeat an enemy, and that's to face him. Whenever we stand face to face with an enemy, he has a way of being diminished and usually disappears entirely. Think of your problems in the same light. So here's what you do. First, sit in a quiet place with a pencil and notepad. On page 1, write your major problem. Don't go into detail. State the problem simply in a sentence or two, 3 at the most. For example, I need more money. How do I go about getting it? Or maybe it's, I'm too fat. What can I do to lose some weight? It could be, my life is dull. How can it be more interesting? Or maybe it's a business problem of some sort. The problems of the human mind and heart are seemingly endless, but they have 2 things in common. The first is that they are not unique, but are shared by hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions of other people. And 2, they can be solved, and solved a lot easier than you might think once you can clearly face them. After you've written your main problem in a sentence or 2 at the top of page 1, then go directly to page 2 and write your second problem if you have one. Keep listing your problems at the top of separate sheets of paper until you've listed them all kinds of problems, anything that bothers you. After you have each problem listed on a separate sheet, then go back to page 1. Read your 1 or 2 sentence statement of your main problem. Now sit back and begin to think about it. Let only those thoughts enter your mind that relate directly to your main problem. After careful thought, begin to list all the possible solutions that come to your mind. Don't worry if some of your ideas for solving your main problem seem impractical. List them anyway. Often when an impossible solution is transferred out of your mind onto paper, it will suggest another solution more apt to be the one you want. Now here's what this process does for you. When you have several problems and carry them around inside of you, they never seem to solve themselves. They only cause you to worry, and they can make you sick. But once you list them, write them down, you've changed your problems from internal worries into another form. Once your problems are in written form, you can look at them, see what they are in the clear light of day, and be in a much better position to defeat the enemy by facing him. You'll feel a great sense of relief once you reduce your problems to writing. The tension disappears, and you feel as if a great weight were lifted from your spirit. I got this idea of writing our problems down and facing them from a man in Kowloon, Hong Kong. It's an old Oriental way of solving problems. So try it. It works like a charm.
I spoke of the 2 kinds of brainstorming: individual ideation, a person thinking up solutions on his own, and group brainstorming, a number of people working together on a problem. Consider for just a moment the middle ground between these 2. This is the situation in which 2 people work together in creative collaboration and idea improvement. There are many good examples of this, ranging from Madame Curie and her husband to Rogers and Hammerstein. This team of 2 technique often works on the spark plug and brake system. One half of the team may be the thinker-upper, and the other half the toner-downer, the judge. So that's the middle ground, the team of 2 technique. It's productive, and I recommend you use it whenever you can. You might ask your wife or husband, a business associate, or a good friend to be the other half of the team. This kind of collaboration is a good way to prove the old saying that 2 heads are better than 1. In this middle ground example, the team of 2 technique, I mentioned that one collaborator frequently acted as the thinker-upper, the spark plug, the other as the toner-downer, the brake. This is not brainstorming. In brainstorming, there are only thinker-uppers, only spark plugs. There are no toner-downers, no breaks, no critics, no judges, until all the ideas are in. Let's move now to group brainstorming. This is the technique in which a number of people hold a meeting with a single purpose in mind, to think up together as many ideas as possible in order to solve one well-defined problem. Between 5 and 10 participants seems to be the best size for such a gathering. It's a good idea to let each member of the brainstorm know in advance of the session the problem to be worked on. Be sure they have as clear a written statement of the problem as you can possibly provide. Knowing the problem, each of them can spend from a few minutes to a few days in personal research and individual ideation before the meeting. When the brainstorm group gathers, make sure each member has a pad and pencil with which to capture ideas he might otherwise lose before he gets a chance to present them to the group. Have someone present to take notes, to record every idea that's produced. Later, these notes should be transcribed and passed along to the brainstormers for further improvement and combination of the ideas. Always have a leader, but keep the brainstorm as informal as possible. Encourage everyone to speak up. Before starting, it's helpful to run briefly through the 4 rules for brainstorming. 1. No negative thinking allowed. The wilder the ideas, the better. 2. Suspend judgment. The ideas will be judged afterward. 3. You want the largest possible quantity of ideas. And 4. Combination and improvement of ideas is what you're after. Then, let the storming begin. Attack the problem from all sides and without let-up. You'll find there's a chain reaction that takes place when the ideas start flowing, like a string of firecrackers going off, one right after the other. It isn't unusual for 10 people to come up with 100 ideas in half an hour, so expect results. Studies of the brainstorm technique show that a given number of people working together on a single problem will be more than 50% more effective, come up with at least half again more ideas than the same number of people working individually. Along with the chain reaction, one idea leading to another, there's a friendly rivalry and personal interaction that increases individual performance in a brainstorming session. Well, there they are, 2 excellent methods for finding the best solution to a problem: individual ideation and group brainstorming. Both are based on the amazingly simple procedure of thinking things up, writing them down, improving them, and judging them only after all the ideas are in. The secret of this system's effectiveness lies in the number of ideas it generates. Thomas Edison said, "I'll try anything. I'll even try Limburger cheese. So try anything, try everything, and write it all down." That's brainstorming, and it gets results. Ideas need to be rated carefully before they can be implemented. There are many scales we can use. Among the most useful are 2, effectiveness and facility. First, how effective a solution to the problem the idea is likely to be, and second, how easy or how difficult it might be to put the idea into action. So after looking over all your ideas, first rate them according to how effective you can reasonably expect them to be, very effective, probably effective, or doubtful. Then rate them for facility or ease of implementation, easy, not so easy, or difficult. Effectiveness and facility make a good 2-way screen for your brainstorm ideas. Remember, you're now judging ideas. This is the time for cold, hard thinking. Suppose you're a manufacturer, and suppose your sales and marketing team brainstorm comes up with some ideas to increase sales. Let's say one of the ideas is to revamp completely one of the products that your company is offering to the public. Let's rate this idea. First, in terms of effectiveness. You know the present product meets a need and is acceptable to the buying public. What about an entirely changed product? Without a lot of marketing tests and then a period of actual manufacturing for sale, it would be hard to say just how effective this idea would be in increasing sales. Better rate it doubtful. And how does this idea of completely revamping one of the products check out on the facility screen? Easy, not so easy, or difficult? It would be difficult, wouldn't it? It would require new engineering, new tools, new manufacturing plans, new packaging, new marketing methods. Suppose, however, one of the salesman's ideas is to feature on a network television program. This would be effective. It would be not so easy, but it could be done. Now, suppose another idea is to set up a new motivational or sales incentive program, a program directed to those people who are at the front of the problem, the salesman. If it were a well-designed and implemented motivational or incentive program, it would stand a good chance of being very effective. It would be easy to do. It should increase the company's sales. There are many other evaluation yardsticks you might use. Two more are time and money. Try rating your ideas against these measurements. For example, in the case of the manufacturer who wants to increase his sales, certainly to change the product would take a great deal of time and money. And to advertise it on a popular network television program would cost a great deal of money. On the other hand, to introduce a new motivational or sales incentive program might be neither too costly nor too time-consuming. So when you evaluate your ideas, measure them against these 4 rating yardsticks: effectiveness, facility, time, cost. Every idea you have may not be worth creative action, and that's why you must skillfully evaluate each of them. But once you've carefully judged your ideas, it's time to take action.
Here's a question for you. How good are you at solving your own problems? If you'll think about it a moment, you'll realize that living well and successfully is really a matter of being able to solve or overcome the problems that are as much a part of living as breathing. But of one thing you can be sure, few people realize that they have within themselves far more problem-solving potential than they ever use. Now let's say you have a problem. Chances are you have several problems. The first thing to remember is that to solve a problem, it must be defined, and that we should take only one problem at a time. So take your biggest problem, define it, sit down, and on a sheet of paper write as complete a description of the problem as you can. Just spelling it out has a way of diminishing it. We're most afraid of what we can't see. When we see our problem written out, it never looks quite as tough. The next step is to break down the problem into details, and don't confuse facts with opinions. Make sure you know what you're talking about, and that the problem is as real as you think it is. Now begin to list possible solutions. Write down as many possible solutions as you can think of, no matter how crazy they may appear. Then talk the problem through with someone you admire and whose opinion you respect. If this doesn't result in the solving of the problem, begin to collect data about it as much as you possibly can. Study everything you can lay your hands on that pertains to this particular problem, and all the time know that the problem has a solution and that you're perfectly capable of finding it. Then, just before you go to sleep at night, read over the data you've collected about the problem or notes you've written from it, and go over in your mind the list of possible solutions that you made earlier. Then relax. Let your mind go to work on it, not your conscious mind, but your subconscious or unconscious mind. Set your alarm clock to wake you an hour earlier than you usually get up. Get up, get yourself a cup of coffee, sit down to a sheet of paper, and try to come up with 20 new ideas that might solve that problem. By doing this, by turning the problem over and over in your mind and letting it incubate while you're asleep and while you're going about your daily work, one fine day when you least expect it, while you're taking a shower or on the way to work or just sitting around the house, the solution will burst into your mind. Or rather, it will slip in quietly and without fanfare, and you'll be startled that the problem is solved. You'll usually find that the solution is so common sense, so plain, so simple and perfect, that you'll wonder why you didn't think of it before. But there's one secret to success in this sort of thing that is vitally important. Whenever you think of your problem, think of it always as only waiting to be solved, and know that you will get the solution. Don't worry about the problem, or be afraid of it. This will only keep you awake, interfere with your digestion, and in general run you down. Face your problem with faith, and bend every effort to solve it, and solve it you will. Then go on to the next one. Each time you solve a new problem, the solution to the next one will be just that much easier. Each of us has a tendency to underestimate his own abilities. We should realize that we have, deep within ourselves, a reservoir of genius that can be tapped if we'll just dig deeply enough.